The American West was strongly affected by vigilante groups, so much that they determined the outcome of some people's lives. A vigilante is defined as a person who takes the law into his or her own hands by avenging a crime. The small town of Hastings, Nebraska, experienced frontier justice when the Committee of 33, a vigilante group, decided the fate of 3 men. The connection of the Union and Pacific Railroad helped greatly in transportation, but also spread crime throughout the West more freely. Like James Green and Fred Ingram, who came to Hastings, Nebraska. They befriended the 18-year-old boy John Babcock, who was a resident of the town. These 3 men planned on causing trouble in Hastings by robbing local general stores. Do we know how Babcock came into the group?
No, it's just assumed that he met them someplace in Hastings.
Was Babcock known around Hastings before this?
No. Well, I shouldn't say no. His family was, I believe there were farmers someplace in the area, but he had no criminal history. He wasn't somebody that would be, quote, known by the authorities or anything. He was just a kid hanging around looking for a job.
On the evening of March 26, 1883, Cassius Millet was closing up his shop in downtown Hastings and heading home when he was mugged by James, Fred, and Babcock. Millet ran from them, and the chase began. Millet was running in front of his neighbor's house when he was shot in the back by one of the men. After hearing the gunshot, his neighbors stormed out of their houses to see the scene, causing the 3 men to flee. Millet made it up to his house, where he was met by his wife at the door, falling into her arms, trying to explain what had just happened. The 3 men were chased out of town by the angry mob of men on Millet Street. Were the men known for their crimes before they came to Hastings?
They were transients. They weren't known in Hastings before they came here.
As the police were trying to piece together the events of that night, they found a mask worn by one of the men that had been dropped during their escape out of town. With this evidence, police figured out the identity of the criminals and arrested Babcock, Green, and Ingram on the Cole farm. The 3 men were taken to Lincoln, where they awaited their court date and sentencing. Millet died the morning after the shooting and was buried April 1st in Highland Cemetery. The night of their first hearing, the town had gathered at Liberal Hall for a dance. There, Diedrich overheard some rumors of the lynching the 3 criminals, in spite of the justice system. Is there a reason the town didn't trust the justice system?
Yes, because of the Olive trial, which had occurred in 1879, and which was a case of rancher murdering homesteaders. And the trial was held in Hastings because of a change of venue. And Olive was guilty, and he was found guilty by the judge and sentenced to prison, but the Supreme Court overturned the sentence on a technicality that the trial should not have been held in Hastings. And so people felt that you couldn't get real justice if you had enough money to hire slick lawyers.
This led to the decision that Diedrich would go to Babcock himself to try to get him to confess. Do we know anything about the conversation between Diedrich and Babcock?
What we know about it is that Diedrich went to see Babcock in jail, convinced him to confess, and promised him if he would confess and implicate the other 2 men to solve the crime, that Diedrich would assist him and help try to get him a lighter sentence.
The town of Hastings felt as if the justice system was going too slow throughout the sentencing of Green, Ingram, and Babcock, so they decided to take matters into their own hands. A group of them met and stormed the courthouse room where the three men were being kept. They overpowered the guards and took the men back to town where the lynching would begin. The mob called themselves the Invisible 33. They took the criminals to the railroad bridge on High Street, where they were planning to hang all three. As the ropes were being tied and placed around the men's necks, Diedrich made his move to save Babcock as he promised. He stepped up in front of him once to save him from the hanging, but no one listened. He stood up a second time and cut Babcock's rope. Diedrich had saved Babcock from his death. Green and Ingram were not so lucky. They were hung until dead on April 3rd, 1883. Although the town of Hastings knew what had happened to Green and Ingram, they were reluctant to talk about it because no one knew exactly who had been involved, and they did not want to get on the bad side of the Invisible 33. Green and Ingram were buried in Potter's Field next to Highland Cemetery. Babcock, on the other hand, was sentenced to 10 years in prison for manslaughter. What was the judge's reaction to the hanging?
Judge Gaslin, who was the district court judge, and the judge that had heard the Olive trial, was in Hastings the night of the lynching, although he was not aware of the lynching and in no way participated in it. And the next morning, when he heard of the lynching, he went to the railroad trestle and saw the bodies. And he was heard to say, "That's one verdict the damn Supreme Court won't overturn."
In this case of vigilantism, the Committee of 33 decided the fate of John Green and Fred Ingram's lives. Although the town did have a justice system in place, some people thought that it was not strong enough or strict enough, so they decided to take matters into their own hands. These groups were never considered the true form of justice, but were known throughout the Western society.